Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Commander's 2 Cents. On episodes like these, I give you my own personal take on topics about the format in general and current news. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. So on a previous episode, I went over the most legit color identity. Essentially, this is an episode where I went through stats on decks on EDH Rec, and I found decks that are legit. In other words, they had 100 or more decks on EDH Rec. And then I went over the color identities that had the highest percentage of legit decks. So today we're going to be basically talking about the other side of that coin by talking about what's the worst color identity. Or a better title might be, what's the color identity with the highest percentage of flops? But that wouldn't fit in the thumbnail, so give me a break. So if a legit deck has 100 or more decks, a flop has 99 or less. These aren't actual statistical terms, they're just ones that I made up, so let's go with it. Now with this episode, color identities that have a higher percentage of flops aren't necessarily the weakest color identities, in my opinion. It just means that they typically have a good amount of commanders that don't see play for whatever reason. I just think that it's fun to dig into the data and to see which color identities have the most flops. So if your favorite color identity shows up on this list, don't take it too seriously and don't get offended. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying there's a lot of flops. And one more quick thing that I mentioned in the last episode, but I should mention it again. I'm not going to be including partners in these episodes because they really throw a wrench into the data. Some people choose to build around just one of the partners, which is extremely illogical, and other weird things happen, so I'm just throwing them out. Because of that, I won't be including 4 color decks in this episode because each of them really only has one actual commander to their name outside of the partners. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's jump into it. So like all reverse top 10 lists, let's start things off at number 10. So the color identity that has the 10th highest flop percentage is Dimir. It has a commander flop percentage of 36.67. So out of the 30 Dimir commanders, 11 of those have less than 100 decks to their name. Now this one might surprise some people, and it definitely surprised me because blue and black are two of the most popular colors in Commander. But in looking through all the Dimir commanders, there are definitely some that don't see a lot of play. For example, Skeleton Chip, which I actually did a deck tech on, has 77 decks to its name. Zodek, Lord of Secrets, only has 64, and Ramses Overdark has 23. Now obviously this is only 3 of the 11 flops, but I'm trying to show you a variety with these. There are definitely older creatures that were made when Commander really wasn't a thing. But of course there are also newer ones that didn't get much interest either. I'll try my best to show you a spread of these throughout the episode. Anyways, let's move on from Dimir and on to number 9. And the color identity with the 9th highest commander flop percentage is Gruul. Gruul is right next to Dimir, but either luckily or not luckily for it, it has one less commander. So with 11 flops out of 29 commanders, it's got a flop percentage of 37.93. So like Dimir, over 30% of its commanders are considered flops. And if you take a look at some of them, you might know why. Trample Tribal with Stonebrow, Crows and Hero only has 65. And I just can't understand how Stang only has 28. A 3/4 that gets you a 3/4 for 6 mana? Wow! And of course there's Senastian Falconer, a mana dork that taps for 2 and costs 5. Currently, it's got the same amount of decks as it can tap for. But now let's move past these travesties in Gruul and on to number 8. And the color identity with the 8th highest commander flop percentage is Rakdos. Out of the 34 commanders in Rakdos, 13 of them are flops. That gives you a flop percentage of 38.24. So Rakdos has more commanders than Dimir and Gruul, but it also has more flops. So now let's look through a few of the fun flops. Rakdos the Defiler currently has only 63 decks to its name. Maybe because when it attacks, you have to sacrifice half the non-demon permanents you control, rounded up. So unless your lands are also demons, you might be in trouble. Then there's Dragonlord Kolaghan, which only has 20 decks to its name, and for good reason. It has whenever an opponent casts a creature or planeswalker spell with the same name as a card in their graveyard, that player loses 10 life. Unfortunately, in a singleton format, that's probably never going to come up. And finally, there's Roga of Kur Keep, which is Kobold Tribal, and yeah, there's only 7 decks to its name. But let's move away from Rakdos and on to number 7. And the color identity with the 7th highest commander flop percentage is Azorius. Out of the 31 Azorius commanders, 12 of those are flops, giving it a flop percentage of 38.71. So nearly 40% of Azorius commanders are flops. So if you pick an Azorius commander at random, chances are decently high that it's a flop. Anyways, let's go through some of the flops now. Currently, Niambi Faithful Healer only has 44 decks to her name. When she comes into play, you get Teferi Time Bender, and that's basically all she does. So I guess if you really wanted a deck built around Teferi Time Bender, there you go. Then there's Ith High Arcanist, which only has 20 decks to its name. You might be familiar with his Maze, which sees a lot more play than he does. And then there's Ayesha Tanaka, who only has 7 decks to her name, and I can't imagine why. If you ever wanted to play with banding, now's your chance. Anyways, it's time for us to move on from Azorius and on to number 6. Now you might be seeing a pattern here, and if you're thinking that this is another 2-color combination, you're right. Because the color identity with the 6th highest commander flop percentage is Selesnya. There are 33 Selesnya commanders out there, and 14 of them are flops. That's a commander flop percentage of 42.42. Now, like I mentioned, you might have noticed a pattern where this has all been 2-color combinations so far. But if you're paying attention, you also might have noticed that these are all allied colored pairs. Just something to keep in mind, and from here you might be able to predict what the top 5 are. But before I spoil too much more, let's go over some Selesnya flops. Kron the Dawnclad in its extremely specific mana cost comes in with 57. The highly costed Course of the Conclave only comes in with 40. And poor Gabriel Angelfire only has 13. Getting either Flying, First Strike, Trample, or Rampage 3 is just not enough. But now let's move away from Selesnya and the other allied colored pairings and on to number 5. And the color identity that has the 5th highest commander flop percentage is Mono Blue. There are 83 Mono Blue commanders out there and 50 of them are flops. That's a commander flop percentage of 60.24%. So that means that if you pick a random Mono Blue commander, the chances are higher that it's a flop than it's a legit commander. So now let's take a look at some of those flops. First up, there's Chisei Heart of Oceans, which only has 51 decks. Maybe that's because it has at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice it unless you remove a counter from a permanent you control. But hold on, you get Merit Lage for free in just 10 turns. And then there's the Hidden Agenda of the Lamp, which is just a 5/6 that you can cast for cheaper, but it doesn't get around commander attacks with that ability. And finally, there's Rebecca, Wizard Savant, which only has 9 decks to its name, and it's a super Tim because it can ping for 2, but it doesn't untap during your next untap step. But now it's time for us to move away from Mono Blue and on to number 4. And the color identity with the 4th highest commander flop percentage is Mono Black. Mono Black has 99 commanders, and 65 of them are flops. That's a commander flop percentage of 65.66. So Mono Black has more commanders than Mono Blue, but it also has a lot more flops. So now let's go over a few of them. Isareth the Awakener might have a bird on her head, but only 33 decks to her name. And then Isan Shade has even less at 22, and that might be because it's a 5/5 with protection from white, and that's it. But the one that really takes the cake for me is Tetsamok Primal Death with only 16 decks. By paying a black, you can reveal it from your hand and put a prey counter on target creature. Unfortunately, in Commander, this doesn't start in your hand. So you just have to simply cast it for 6, bounce it back to your hand, then start getting those prey counters on everything. It's super simple. Anyways, it's time for us to move on from Mono Black and on to number 3. And the color identity with the 3rd highest commander flop percentage is Mono Green. There are currently 80 Mono Green commanders and 53 of them are flops. That's a commander flop percentage of 66.25, which just beats out Mono Black. Although for Mono Green, I don't think that's a victory. Anyways, let's talk about some of the Mono Green commander flops. First up, you've got Samurai Tribal with a Sao in Light and Bushi. Unfortunately for him, he's the only Samurai in Mono Green. And yes, I know changelings are a thing, but come on. Next up, there's Iwamari of the Open Fist, which only has 10 decks to its name. Now, it is a 5/5 with Trample for 4, but when it comes into play, each opponent can put a legendary creature card from their hand onto the battlefield. There's absolutely nothing that can stop my 5/5 Trampler, well, except for that Kozilek that you just got for free. And of course, there's Kodama the South Tree, which is all about Spirit and Arcane Tribal in Mono Green. Yeah, I can't imagine why that's not a thing. Anyways, moving away from Mono Green and on to number 2. And the color identity with the 2nd highest commander flop percentage is Mono Red. There are 83 Mono Red commanders and 55 of them are flops. That's a commander flop percentage of 66.27. That's right, Mono Red's flop percentage was 0.02 higher than Mono Green. And within those flops, there are such gems as Ben Ben, Joven, and Tuk Tuk. I mean, just look at these gems. How are these not legit commanders? I mean, Joven especially, you really don't want to mess with that guy. Now, in the top 5, you've probably noticed a certain pattern. And even before this episode started, you might have had an idea on what color identity is the worst in Commander. If you've been on Reddit in the past year, you've probably seen plenty of posts about it. So without further ado, let's move on to number 1. And the color identity that has the highest flop percentage, to no one's surprise, is Mono White. Now, I said earlier that flop percentage doesn't necessarily equate to being worse than others, but in this case it does. Mono White is by far the worst color identity in Commander, and I don't think that's debatable. I mean, just look at its flop percentage. It's 12 points higher than the next highest. Out of the 97 mono white commanders out there, 76 are flops. That's a flop percentage of 78.35. So nearly 80% of mono white commanders are flops. That's pretty terrible. If you pick a random mono white commander, you have a much higher percentage chance of it being a flop. There's a lot of flops to pick from, and here are the 3 that I chose. Hey, would you like to gain life or prevent damage? Oh, that's not useful? I'm sorry. Hi there, I've got protection from creatures. Oh, that's not really that useful? Okay. But can I tell you more about life? Okay, never mind. Now, I hate to kick a color identity when it's down, but Wizards, please give us some good mono white commanders. But I just want to note one thing before I end this episode. Obviously, color identities that have a lot of older commanders that weren't made with commander in mind have somewhat of a disadvantage when it comes to these numbers. There is absolutely no perfect solution when it comes to analyzing this. Again, it's just for fun. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this list. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.